recorded live.
Well, good evening, all. Welcome to Unzipping Reality, the Third Awakening. I'm Leah LaChapelle, sitting here at the helm. Joining me this evening is my wonderful friend, David Browning. When he returned from India, he published his first book entitled Seeing Through the Eyes of God, and also developed his course, The Mystic Seven, 7 Keys to Abiding in the Awareness of the Enlightened Mind. Welcome to Unzipping Reality, David. It's such a beautiful pleasure to have you.
Good evening, Leah.
I'd like to ask you, first and foremost, in light of the title of your offering called The Mystic Seven, can you tell us what is a mystic?
I would have to define that as someone who is continually aware and abides in a state of their true nature. Someone who, everywhere they look, everything they see as God.
Okay, let me get this clear. Everything?
Everything.
You are actually, I didn't say this in the opening remarks, but you are actually the founder and facilitator for the Samadhi Retreat and Meditation Center. In the title of this beautiful place, and we're going to talk about that later, you named it Samadhi. You named your beautiful, loving space, this incredible retreat and meditation center. You named it Samadhi. Can you tell us what that word is? It doesn't sound like English to me. And so why did you choose that word? What is Samadhi? Can you just kind of unfold that for us a little bit?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, 17 years ago, I had an experience. And what happened was I was on a flight back from Washington, D.C., and I went into a state, at the time I didn't know what it was. It was just this pure silence. And when I got home that evening, I went to the couch and I sat down at 10 o'clock. I knew nothing of Eastern religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism, any of those paths at all. And when I sat on the couch, I went into a state of what I call nothingness. There was no sound, no voices. I wasn't channeling. I saw no visions. There was just this pure emptiness. 6 hours later, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I came out. And the very first thing that I was aware of, that I was eternal, that I would never die. And it was not a cognitive process. It wasn't something I thought, oh, this is what I saw or what I felt. It was a knowing that was inside of me. And I remember looking at the door and wishing that someone would come through the door with a sword and cut my head off at that moment, because I knew that I would be somewhere else observing that action, that I would still exist, that I was truly eternal. The next night at 10 o'clock, I didn't think, oh, that was a neat experience, and I'll go back and try that again. I simply sat at the couch at 10 o'clock, disappeared into this nothingness, into this emptiness again. And when I came out at around 4 o'clock that morning, 6 hours later, I had a similar experience. When I came out, there was this awareness that I was infinite. This process continued for about 6 months. And later, years and years and years later, I realized that what was happening was that I was going into the source, that I was going to a place which was within all of us. And this silence, this nothingness that abides there, is where all knowledge of the universe exists, where every experience, where every emotion, where every thought, where every life that has ever existed and ever will abides. And in that moment that you abide in that space, you bring back everything with you. And I use the word samadhi because it's the closest word I've been able to find that is close to the description of the spirit experience.
All right, so I can read minds, and I know that people are wanting to know, what were you smoking?
Absolutely nothing. Matter of fact, as a young teenager, I did experiment with different, drinking and smoking a little pot and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
But I had started a documentary film company 12 years prior to this experience and had gotten into a point of my life where that kind of activity was no longer of interest to me. I didn't drink at all. I mean, not even a drop of wine, a single beer. I did not smoke cigarettes. I did absolutely nothing whatsoever. This was a completely natural occurrence.
You're not the first person that I've heard say this. What is it that happens when a human, a physicality, emotional being no longer craves that kind of a substance? Because, word has it on the street that stuff is pretty fun, that it's pleasurable, yada, yada. I mean, do you are you disallowing certain pleasures in your life, or what happens? Why did you stop craving that?
Well, most of that came just from when I started my company, my documentary film company. I was living a life where I was totally fulfilled. I was traveling around the world. I had all the money that I ever needed. I had a wife and a family who loved me. I got to do things that people only dreamed of doing, climbing mountains in northern Italy, treasure hunting in the Caribbean, traveling through South America. It was just, I was so fulfilled that there was no need for that at all. And on the aircraft, when I was flying back from D.C., that was the only awareness I had, was that at that point in my life, I could not attain anything else. Sure, I could have a little bit more money. I might be able to go to one more spot on the planet that I hadn't been to, even though I'd traveled around the world at least 4 times. And I knew that there was nothing to attain. And in that moment of pure fulfillment was when I dropped into that silence.
Did it feel like a relief?
I don't know if it was a release. It was just, I knew my life was over, that the life that I was existing was over, that I was now going to go to a place that was just pure truth, just pure knowledge.
So in this place of silence, deep, deep within, this is samadhi?
Yes. Samadhi is the pure and absolute silence of the mind. That is my definition.
All right, of the mind.
Yes.
Is this the mind of a human, one human being's mind, or are you referring to the universal mind?
It would be on a conventional level, and I'd like to discuss a little bit later about the difference between conventional and ultimate reality. On a conventional level, it would be the human mind. We have so much activity all the time. I have to be at work at 8 o'clock. I have to worry about my children in 6th grade and 10th grade, how they're doing with their grades. I have to worry about my spouse and my place in society. And so the mind is continually active. It never rests. It's just spinning and spinning and spinning. So in samadhi, that mind, that ego, it completely drops into silence. But as I mentioned, when the conventional ego mind becomes silent, you drop into the consciousness of the source where everything abides.
All right. So it becomes very still and quiet. Do you still have to drive your carpool? Do you still go to work? Do you still make dinner?
Yes, absolutely. I remember the very first experience I had of this, I was actually driving a car, and when I came out of samadhi after about an hour, I was still driving the car, still on the highway 175 coming into Dallas. But I hadn't been aware of that. basically the source had taken over, and it was in control of all of that, and I came out. Once you start practicing samadhi, practicing being able to go in that state, there's actually 3 different states of samadhi. The first state is the one that I abided in during those 6 hours, which I call asamprajnata samadhi. And that's a samadhi where there's absolutely no perception at all. The eyes are closed, there's no vision, there's no sound, there's absolutely nothing, not even an awareness of an experience, and therefore there is no experiencer. There is nothing. The other 2 samadhis, the first one is actually a term in Sanskrit, which is called samprajnata samadhi, and that is samadhi where there is perception, where your eyes are open and you perceive everything around you, but you perceive it simply as the source. You see it as God. So there is no attachment, there is no anger, there is no sorrow, there is no suffering. There is just the divine. But there is no experience with it. It is just the perception of things around you as God. Then the third is actually a name that I had to make up because there wasn't anyone that I could find anywhere in any text or scriptures. And it was called, I call it Samprajnata Ananda Samadhi. And that is samadhi where there is perception, where you are in a waking state and you see everything around you as God. But there is an accompanying experience of bliss, where there is just this unbelievable energy of bliss that you're abiding in. And so in these 3 states, they are somewhat different in what you experience.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. And so how did people respond to you initially when you went into samadhi? Did they think you were in a coma?
Well, fortunately, it happened just at night. For the first 6 months during this process, it was occurring between 10 o'clock in the evening and 4 o'clock in the morning. So the only one that really knew anything was happening was my wife, because I wasn't coming to bed to be with her. And I talked to her and told her the process I was going through. And every day after I came out, I would spend several hours journaling. I would write in this state of awareness, in this samadhi state. I would go to the computer and I would just journal. And it wasn't of my mind. It wasn't, oh, this is what the experience was and this is what it was like. It was just pure information that we all are aware of, that's within us. And when she would wake up, I would express to her what happened, what experience I had, the stuff that I had written. And I would travel. I was at Canyon Lake at the time, and I would visit this one lady and share with her what was going on. But from her perspective, all it was some guy, and I don't really know. She may have thought I was completely crazy. Or that I was awakening. I really don't know. But she was very kind and would let me share this with her. So there wasn't a lot of people around me that were seeing me anymore. At this point, I had left both of my jobs. I had a documentary film company that I owned, and I also had a patent, a U.S. patent that was in Walmart, Cabela's Bass Pro Shop. So I had 2 very successful companies that I had basically just walked away from. I had decided that this is what I wanted to do, that I wanted to know the truth at any cost, no matter what it took. So I was mainly alone for those 6 months.
So the jobs were not as interesting to you as a motivation as they once were. You were more motivated by your journey in truth.
Absolutely.
I see.
Absolutely.
I see. So these states of samadhi, what happens to your personality? Do you have a personality?
Yes, I do. I assume people talk to me and people interact with me in a certain way. It has changed quite a bit because I own nothing. I desire nothing. I don't go shopping, and I don't need money to go out and get things. The 2 years that I spent in India, I had 2 pairs of pants, 2 shirts, a bowl, and I lived in a monastery with monks and had absolutely no possessions, which is how I live my life now. but I still interact with people. I still carry some of my habits, and I'm somewhat a little OCD, so I still have that tendency. But as far as an existence of David Browning, that no longer exists.
I see. But you remember him well, obviously.
Yes, I do.
And so now, as you live your life, you're still in a physical plane. You remember the prior David Browning. What is ahead for you?
Well, I'd like to mention one thing that you brought up right there, and that was that I am still in a physical body.
Mm-hmm.
The Mystic Seven, and I guess first of all, I'd like to just mention this. After the 6 months, what I did was I went out for about 2 years, and I wanted to find out if I had lost my mind, if I was crazy, or if this was an experience that people had. So I started looking for anything I could get my hands on, a book, literature, courses, techniques, practices. And I found a lot of things that I found were very superficial. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they weren't reaching the depths of the awareness that I had experienced. And then I found some texts and some practices that were discussing these. They're very obscure texts. One of them is called the Yoga Vasista. Another one is called the Upadesa Sahasri. And these are ancient Sanskrit texts that most people aren't familiar of. But within them, not only did I find descriptions of the experience I had, but they were word for word what I had written in my journals. Knowledge that is thousands of years old in this state of consciousness and infinite because it has existed forever. And the Mystic Seven is basically 7 experiences. These are direct experiences that are common throughout any person during their process of awakening. Everybody will have different sorts of flavors, like some people will have psychic experiences, or some people will go into shamanism, and some people will get energy from crystals, and so they'll have these different flavors. But all of them, without exception, have these same 7 experiences, and that is, there is a source. You are eternal. You are infinite. You are one. There is no separation of you or anything that surrounds you. There is a state called nothingness, which you abide in. And when you return from that nothingness, which is actually beyond enlightenment, you come back with this awareness of neither affirmation nor negation, and the awareness that there is no essential nature. Because you are the source, because you are everything, then you have no essential nature because you are everything. And that's the Mystic Seven. But before that, I was still struggling with, there's no way you can teach this. This is experiential. And so I just went to a cave. I decided, because this couldn't be shared, because it's inexpressible, because it has to be experienced, I just went to a cave, my own self-imposed cave, which was a healing arts center for 12 years, and then India for 2 years. But in India, at the end of a year and a half of silence, I met a monk, and he gave me this concept, which is called conventional and ultimate awareness. And in that, I realized that I would be able to give people tools that they could use to have this experience. And I could give them guides to help them remind themselves, are they in conventional awareness, or are they in ultimate awareness?
Is there any other kind of awareness below conventional awareness? I mean, is it like zombie awareness?
Well,
I mean,
not
some
really.
people have no idea whatsoever that they are even conscious.
Right.
That that's even possible. So there are people walking around the planet that are quite unconscious, and then there are people who are probably conventionally conscious. But I love your terminology, the conventional versus the ultimate, because this has a whole languaging around it. But before we get further into that, I want to go back to the nothingness, because I have heard this term before. I think I read about this in The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and he calls it the no thing. It's more like a hyphenated word. It's the no thingness, the no thing, nothing. You're saying it like it's nothingness, like there's no thing and there never was and there never will be.
Misunderstanding that a lot of people have, that nothingness is nothing. And what happens is when you first go into the experience of nothingness, and again, I'd like to remind you that, and everybody listening, that when you are on an awakened state and you reach the state of enlightenment, you have perceived that you are eternal. You have perceived that you are infinite, that you are one with everything, and that there is this source. And what happens is everything around you is God. Everything around you is the divine. And you're in this state of extreme bliss. But you still are aware that there's something beyond that, something beyond enlightenment. And when you drop into nothingness for an extended period of time, you realize that that's where you had always been before, in this emptiness, into this void. But it's not nothing, because within this state of nothingness abides everything. Every sound, every smell, every emotion, every experience, every life, everything, every animal, every person, every planet, every existence, through all time and space exists within this nothingness. But because it's so vast, because it's so big, the individual mind can't comprehend it. So when you're abiding in this state, there is no experience at all.
Got it. It's pure attention.
Yes.
Yes, and have you found that human beings have an intrinsic fear of being nothing, like they're going to be annihilated and no longer exist?
Yes, absolutely we do. And it's the ego. The ego it knows that if you go and even peek at this, that there's a chance that it will die. And so it does everything in its power to not let you see this. And when we glimpse into it, it happened to me when I was a teenager. I was actually doing some course in light in Dallas. And we did the white light, we did the green light, we did the blue light, and all of a sudden the instructor took us to the gold light. And the moment I saw that gold light, I went, uh-oh, there's the truth. And I ran out of that room in pure terror, because I knew the moment I went into that light, I would die. That I, as this ego, as this individual self, would no longer exist, even though I would merge and become the source, all-powerful, all-knowing. There was still that the ego does not want that. The ego does not want to die.
For sure. I want to remind everyone that this is a live call, and if you have a question for David Browning, don't be bashful. You can call in 724-444-7444. The ID number is 128838. 128838. And then press 1 if you want to speak with David, and I'll recognize you on the call.